I used to believe silence was safer than asking to belong. The kitchen tile was cold under my heels as I stood holding the tray with both hands, not out of reverence, just habit. The plates didn't clink anymore. I had learned how to move without drawing notice. Logan was sprawled across the rug shoes, still on controller in hand. "Juice," he muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. Then, after a beat, "with ice." I reached for the glass on the counter and filled it. I didn't ask if he meant apple or cranberry. It wouldn't have mattered. Deborah sat across the room, thumbs tapping at her phone, not looking up. Randy's voice rose over the hum of the TV. "I already said it. She doesn't need a place at the table anymore." The tray wobbled slightly. I steadied it. "Less presence, less tension," Deborah replied, her voice flat, precise. "Let's keep things smooth." I walked in anyway, careful not to scrape the tray against the wall. There were 4 plates arranged neatly on the table. Knife on the right, fork on the left. The 5th was missing. Deliberate. No one turned their head. I placed the tray on the counter. A spoon clattered, but no one flinched. From my pocket, the screen of my phone blinked. One new message from Aunt Marion Brianna. Maybe skip Christmas this year. It'll keep things simpler. Simpler. There was a burn at the back of my throat. Not from heat, just the kind of tightness that makes it hard to swallow. I stood for a while by the stove. The kettle was still warm. The handle had a chip in it from last month, the same day I dropped the mug with the faded red birds. No one mentioned it then either. Logan coughed. "Napkin." I handed it to him. He didn't look at me. "Don't linger," Deborah murmured as I turned. "It makes people uncomfortable." I nodded, not out of agreement, just because it was easier than replying. The hallway light flickered as I walked back to the kitchen. Something about it reminded me of motel signs, places where people stopped briefly but never stayed. I didn't reach for a plate. I didn't fix myself anything. I folded the dish towel, slowly, smoothing the edges, as if that would help them hold shape. Then I sat down on the stool by the pantry. No one saw. No one needed to. And that was the moment I understood presence can be erased without anyone raising their voice. I thought being good meant being quieter than what hurt. The alarm on my old flip phone used to buzz at 5:10. Set, not out of need, but out of some instinct that maybe breakfast would matter. I folded the sleeves of my sweatshirt twice so they wouldn't dip into the eggs. No one ever asked for toast, but I made it anyway. 4 slices stacked like patience. Once I left a note taped to the fridge. "Breakfast's ready. Have a good day." I used my nicest pen. It was still there that night, untouched, the ink slightly smudged by the cold. Deborah once called me into her room with a blanket over her shoulders. "You'll need to cancel that college visit. Logan has a sore throat and I need help." I didn't argue. I clicked open the laptop and sent an email to the admissions office. She watched me for a second. "That's a wise choice. I knew you'd be reasonable." I set the mugs for dinner one night, trying to match the ones without chips. Randy walked past, glanced at the table, and paused. "You're not eating with us, are you?" I folded my hands. "No, just setting things out." "Good, it's less awkward that way." I used to think asking small questions would make room for bigger ones later, but even "can I bring a friend over?" was met with a twitch of Deborah's eyebrow. "This isn't a place for people like that. Keep your little world small, Brianna." There was a sweater I wore, often grey-thinned at the elbows. It had one thread I refused to cut because I liked knowing something stayed loose. She once pointed at it. "Even your clothes feel incomplete." I remember wiping down the kitchen counter late one night. The light above the stove buzzed softly. Randy stood by the door, arms crossed. "Do you even try to read a room? Or do you just like creating tension?" I didn't speak, just wiped in small, practiced circles, like the silence would polish me into someone they might keep. The longer I stayed invisible, the more they accused me of being disruptive. I used to think that shrinking would make me easier to love, that if I stayed out of the way, they'd reach out. But shrinking is not the same as belonging. And sometimes the smallest voice is the first one they forget. I've learned that the things no one remembers are often the ones that never leave. The storage cabinet by the laundry room had a broken hinge and smelled faintly of mothballs. I opened it slowly, looking for an old extension cord, and found a box labeled Holiday Decor. The corner was soft from years of quiet damp. Inside were paper snowflakes, tangled lights, a chipped ceramic angel with one wing faded grey, and a bundle of cards tied with twine. I loosened the knot and unfolded one. "Merry Christmas from all of us" was written in Deborah's tight script, followed by 3 names in gold ink: Randy, Deborah, Logan. Just those. I ran my thumb along the edge of the card. The corner had been torn and taped. Not even the damage felt personal. There had been a time in 10th grade when my art project won the state prize. A sculpture, delicate and strange, built from discarded hardware and clay. I placed the ribbon on the kitchen table and waited. Deborah barely glanced. "Fine, but let's not get dramatic. It's just a school thing." Logan smeared red marker across the sculpture 2 days later. I found it behind the couch, missing a piece. Randy waved it off. "He's 8. Stop making it into something." Once I filled out the form for a summer art retreat. Printed it cleanly, clipped the brochures, and left it under a coaster so it wouldn't look obvious. Deborah handed it back without lifting the top page. "We're not spending hundreds on a hobby. Be realistic." She ordered Logan a gaming console the same week. New still in the box when I saw it on the porch. There was a photograph on the hallway wall, a formal one taken at the mall during the winter sale. Randy in a navy sweater, Deborah in plaid, Logan holding a wrapped box. I stared at it once after putting away laundry, scanning for myself, even when I knew I wasn't there. It looked better without clutter, Deborah had said once, folding towels. Pictures shouldn't feel crowded. I nodded and folded my own shirts in quarters. The neckline of one was stretched, the colour washed into a soft, almost invisible blue. I kept wearing it anyway, not for comfort, just to remember what faded on its own and what was erased. Some people forget because it's easy. I remember because I had to. I used to think obedience could soften the edge of a command. The cup in my hand was already full, the condensation tracing a line down my wrist. I didn't move. The glass stayed on the tray, untouched, like so many things I'd once offered. "Did you not hear me?" The voice cracked across the room. "Pour again." I didn't answer. My hand hovered near the pitcher, not out of defiance, just calculation. The ice had barely melted. Nothing had changed. He pushed back his chair. The scrape echoed against the floor, sharp and familiar. "You're not here to think. You're here to serve." I looked at Logan. His arms were folded, his spoon now on the floor between us. He smirked like he knew the rules better than I did. He can do it himself. The words came before I meant them to. Even now, I'm not sure if I spoke them aloud or if they simply escaped. A silence fell, not heavy, just clean, like a room just vagued. The belt came off with the practiced rhythm of habit. I didn't flinch. That part of me had already retreated somewhere quieter. Deborah didn't stop him. She stepped closer and gripped my face with her thumb at my jaw. "You either serve or you leave, that's simple." Her nails pressed into my cheek, sharp enough to mark. I looked at her. She didn't blink. Then the first strike landed shoulder sharp, the second found my ribs. My breath folded inward. I bent, but didn't fall. "You always need to be reminded," he muttered. Mouthy girl with nothing to offer. The third hit made my knees tremble. I caught myself on the counter palm flat, the edge of the sink digging into my wrist. Logan giggled. The sound was light, almost sweet. I thought of how it might sound coming from a child who didn't know what he was watching. "Out," Randy said, pointing toward the front door. "Let's see how far you get without a roof." I reached for the drawer by instinct, wallet empty, checked my hoodie pocket. A single bill crumpled at the edges. Toothbrush. I whispered it more to myself than anyone else. No one replied. The door closed behind me, a slow, decisive sound. Then the click. I stood still for a while on the concrete-socked feet, soaking up cold from below. The porch light didn't turn on. Maybe it never had. I used to think being quiet meant I wasn't worth interrupting. The sidewalk pressed hard into the soles of my feet, each crack and seam mapping out a kind of directionless trail. I stopped near a bench outside a shuttered gas station, the kind with the lights still humming even when no one was inside. My reflection in the glass door looked warped, bent at the edges like a photo left too long in sun. A group passed by, voices loud and scattered. One boy laughed, and something cold hit my chest. I didn't flinch, just let it soak through the thin cotton of my sleeve, sticky and sweet. She's just sitting there, like a mannequin or something. Their footsteps faded faster than they arrived. I watched the residue from the drink drip off my wrist. It reminded me of the time Deborah overwatered a potted fern and blamed me for the puddle on the tile. Even when you're still, you make a mess. I shifted on the bench, shoulder stiff. My fingers brushed the edge of the seat, catching on a splinter. I didn't pull away. A man approached from the side. Worn coat, one button, missing a paper bag held carefully under one arm. His voice didn't rise. "You hungry?" He sat without waiting for an answer. No pressure, just weight settling beside mine like he'd done this before. He unwrapped a sandwich and tore it in half. One piece rested on the bench between us. I looked at it. My stomach moved before I did. "You don't have to explain anything," he said. Eyes forward. "Food's not a question." The bread was soft but dry. My teeth caught on the wax paper. I chewed slowly, each bite measured. No one had handed me anything without conditions in a long time. He pulled a blanket from his bag, folded slightly frayed at the edge, laid it over my knees without looking. Name's Walter. Walter Grant. I didn't speak. The sandwich was nearly gone. Crumbs stuck to my palm. I wiped them onto my pants. "My name's Brianna." It came out quieter than I expected, not like a confession, just a placeholder finally returned to me. Walter nodded once. "Then I know who I'm praying for tonight." I didn't cry, didn't reach, just let the blanket stay. Some people want answers. He gave me space instead, and I kept my name in my mouth like something I wasn't ready to put down again. I used to think locked doors meant I wasn't welcome. Now I understand they sometimes mean I'm finally alone. The mattress dipped in the center, thin and used, but it held. I folded the scratchy blanket to the edge and kept the sheet tucked under my legs. The room had a metal chair and a window that didn't open. The light from the hallway seeped in through the door frame, like it wasn't sure it was allowed. In the cafeteria, the tray slid across the counter with a soft scrape. 2 saltless crackers. A paper cup filled with something that smelled like coffee, but settled like water. I sat by the wall. The girl across from me had a bruise shaped like a thumbprint below her eye. "You're the one who pulled a knife, right?" She didn't wait for a reply. "That's what intake said. They think you're dangerous." I looked down at the tray. One of the crackers had cracked into 3 uneven pieces. A staff member called my name first only, no last. I followed her into an office that smelled like lemon cleaner and recycled paper. Amanda Fields wore a blouse with shoulder pads and a pin shaped like a dove. We received a report. Her fingers rested on a manila folder with my name in block letters. It says you became aggressive, threatening, that you may have mental instability. She didn't blink when she added, a danger to minors. I waited for the chair to creak beneath me, but it didn't. The only sound was the clicking of her pen cap. They said I might be a threat. I repeated not as a question. Just to hear the shape of it. Amanda slid the folder toward me. You have a right to see the file. The first page had my name. The second had theirs. The last one held her signature. Deborah Monroe, not Whitmore. No trace of the name she'd been given or the one she gave me. The accusation was printed in even spacing, no handwriting. Subject exhibited unstable behavior. Subject escalated conflict. Subject refused instruction. No mention of the bruises. No mention of the porch. No mention of silence. They didn't just send me away, I said, folding the page without looking up. They erased me. Amanda reached for something behind her, but didn't speak. I left the file on the chair. Some things don't need defending, especially when the people who built the lie signed it in permanent ink. Some stories don't need names, just silence, loud enough to echo. The flyer on the bulletin board above my cot curled at the edges. Someone had underlined the words "speak only when safe." I hadn't posted the essay with any plan. Just a line, then a few more, then the last. My name is Brianna. I didn't run away. I was thrown away. The staff didn't ask questions when the phones began ringing more often. I sat in the intake room waiting for my turn to meet with Amanda. A volunteer handed me a folded note with a name scribbled on the corner. She didn't know who Deborah Monroe was, only that she called 3 times before noon. She said it's urgent, Amanda explained later, eyes glancing toward her screen. She says the family's under attack. No one asked me if the story was true, just whether I meant to keep it up. She wants to meet. She says your version is hurting people. There was a pause before Amanda read the rest. She thinks it's time to come together for the family's image. That was her word. Image. The room hummed with the faint buzz of the fluorescent light. I didn't blink. Later on the public computer, I saw a message pop into the filtered inbox. Chad Monroe. Seen what you wrote? We all have. Maybe delete it before things blow up. We're still blood like it or not. He didn't ask how I was. Not even a line about that night. Just brand management in lowercase. I logged out. The plastic chair shifted beneath me as I stood. I walked back to my bed and found the small slip of paper still folded under the edge of my pillow. Tasha had written it in pen back in 10th grade during detention. Write your own story, or someone else will write it for you. The ink had bled a little at the corner where I'd once cried over it. I didn't smooth the wrinkle. I pinned it to the corkboard beside the flyer, then stepped back. No reply to Deborah. No answer to Chad. Not because I was afraid, because silence when chosen holds longer than any defense. Some mornings don't ask anything from me, and that's what makes them generous. The clay stained under my nails now feels more familiar than soap. I stopped wearing gloves after the 3rd week. The texture matters. The slip of wet earth between my fingers reminds me that I don't have to shape things perfectly to have them hold. The bowl I made still sits on the shelf by the sink, crooked uneven at the rim, the words "still here" carved in with a blunt wooden stick. It wobbles when touched. I leave it that way. Marge handed me a name tag, laminated but curling a little at the edge. Assistant clay technician, Brianna Whitmore. I didn't correct it. Not because the name was right, but because it was finally mine to keep or discard. You think too hard before touching the wheel, Marge muttered one afternoon, wiping her hands on her apron. Let the clay answer first. I nodded and didn't try to explain. Some things stop needing explanation once you stop needing permission. I sweep floors, stir glazes, stack shelves. I lock the studio at dusk and walk to the room above the used bookstore. There's a narrow stairwell with chipped blue paint and a window that doesn't quite close. I leave it open. The cold comes in, but so does the quiet. The shelf beside the door holds 3 pairs of shoes, my shoes, lined up neatly, soles touching the edge. No one moved them. No one rearranged. I bought a kettle for the corner and stitched a cloth cover for the mug Marge gave me. Every morning I pour hot water over mint leaves. Not because someone's watching, but because I like how the steam curls up like breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The bookstore owner called up once from the stairs. "You all right up there?" I replied. "Yes, I have everything I need." He paused, then chuckled. "That's more than most." I didn't say anything else. I folded the receipt from my last paycheck and tucked it into the back of my journal. On the next page, I drew a lopsided circle. Not every scar stays visible. Some dissolve into muscle memory, quiet, unannounced, but never forgotten. Some things don't echo when they fall. They just land. The envelope arrived without a return address, folded in uneven thirds. The handwriting hadn't changed, sharp, slanted, uncorrected. Inside a single sheet. No greeting, no date. Just a line I had already memorized by the time I finished reading. I was raised hard. I raised you harder. Call if you want. Mom. No apology, no question. Just a worn-out rope tossed loosely between us like it was my job to tie the knot. I placed the letter beside the small river stone I'd carried since last spring. Smooth, cool, no longer wet. I didn't write anything back, didn't rip it, just left it folded and let it sit like something finished. At the clerk's window, I slid the papers forward without hesitating. Reason for name change. The question barely reached me. I answered, "I'm done carrying what doesn't belong to me." The form read, "From Brianna Cole Whitmore to Brianna Arden." Arden, a name I once saw in a play years ago in a library program no one came to. The character had no family, no estate, but lived anyway, laughed anyway. I remembered that. I didn't need a name with a weight. I needed one with space. The clerk stapled the papers, nodded without a smile. "Final hearings next week. Bring ID." I nodded back. Outside, I sat on the bench across from the courthouse steps. Wind curled through my sleeves, caught at the cuff of my coat, where the thread had come loose. I didn't fix it. Some frayed edges deserved to stay visible. In my pocket, the laminated name tag from the studio pressed against my thigh. I hadn't changed that yet, but I would. Not to erase what had been, only to mark what no longer held me. I touched the manila folder, ran my finger along the edge of the paper inside and whispered, "Not to anyone. Not even to myself, really. I'm not hers anymore." No one around heard it. The moment didn't need an audience. The courthouse bell struck once behind me. Not loud, just final, and I didn't turn back. Some things grow even when no one watches. The shelf leaned slightly to the left, my first attempt at carpentry still holding. On it, The bowl with uneven edges rested next to the glazed wing now set upright. The small phoenix figure sat at the center, its shape built from broken buckles and red clay hardened by quiet fire. The pothos hadn't wilted. I'd read somewhere it could survive even when forgotten. I touched a leaf. It bent, then lifted back on its own. The glaze dust still clung to the folds of my shirt. I didn't brush it off. There was nothing urgent waiting. The studio would open again tomorrow. The wheel would turn again. That was enough. In the windowsill drawer, I placed the letter beside the stone and the shard of broken ceramic. The envelope stayed sealed. I didn't need to reread what I'd already outlived. Some memories didn't need retelling. They just needed somewhere to rest. The candle flickered once before settling. The match curled to black in the tray smoke, trailing like breath held too long. I poured the tea slowly, watching how the cup slightly chipped at the rim held anyway. No one was expected. No one had the address. I heard you finally came to your senses. That was Aunt May the last time we crossed paths. She'd looked at my hands still rough from clay and added, "Some people just can't handle pressure. It's not your fault. It's how you were raised." I hadn't replied. I'd only nodded like a closing book. Her voice didn't echo here. Outside, the light stretched across the floor, long and warm. It touched the wing's tip first, then crept toward the phoenix's chest, where the crack still showed. I didn't smooth it out. I'd stopped believing in perfect surfaces. The mug warmed my palms. The scent of steeped mint drifted with the candle wax, quiet and real. I leaned back, eyes half closed, not from weariness, but from presence. No ceremony, no crowd, just the quiet fact of being here. I thought once that I needed a witness to prove I'd made it through. Now I understood. Stillness can be the proof. Breathing with both feet on the floor can be the answer. The light reached the last tile on the wall and paused there. I didn't speak. I didn't move. And for the first time, I didn't need to.